21 years. So this is our 21st year running Nextjump. I founded it actually in college, junior year. I'm going to talk a lot about mistakes. I think that you learn more from mistakes. So mistakes in some of the lessons. Some tactical as well. So feel free to my email and Twitter. You can ask me questions afterwards, here afterwards. Your email as well. Every one of you, generally speaking, if you're going to start a company, you're going to have a trade-off. You can take a 6-figure salary somewhere, or you're going to go and gamble to go and try to build a business. Now, this is typically what most founders go through, especially in tech. I've got an idea, and if it works, I'm going to make money. If not, I'm going to go back to the drawing board and come up with an idea. And if I told you, and anyone goes to Vegas, anyone goes to Atlantic City, would you ever place a $100,000 bet on the roulette wheel? A single number. Would you do that? It's crazy, right? Because the odds are 1 in 38 that you win. 1 in 38 is if you put a $100,000 bet. Most people would never do that. Yet when you're running a business, you're doing worse than that. 500 companies globally exit in tech. 500 companies per year. IPO, whether you sell, they find liquidity, 500 per year. Numbers are all over the place, but it ranges from hundreds of thousands to millions that get created every year. Founders like you will create 1 million different companies every year. That is an odd of 1 to 2,000. $100,000 bet. Your 6-figure salary, your odds are far worse than roulette. And I know you're all very smart here. You're mathematically savvy enough to know that's a bad bet, and that's even a worse bet. So the point is, you have to think it's more than the money. If you're going to do it for the money, I think you're already lost. Now, there's a recent TED Talk I saw over the weekend. It's by this guy named Bill Gross. He founded Idea Lab. He has 100 portfolio companies in it. And then he went and analyzed 100 other companies, Uber, Airbnb, and really studied. And I'm giving you the punchline. If you want to save 9 minutes, this is the punchline slide, which was, what is the most important element of success in startups? So factored everything and said timing was the most important thing. Then came team and execution, the idea, the business model, and funding was last. Except, here's the thing, if you ever gamble, whether it's blackjack, roulette, craps, you know the most common thing people say? Oh, I knew it was going to be blackjack, I should have bet. I knew it was going to be black. They missed the timing. Timing is not in your control. If you think you can time things, you're going to lose your shirt gambling in casinos, you will lose your shirt building your business. You cannot control timing. I believe, I found, team is the single most important thing. If you build a team that is strong and getting stronger, you will have better ideas. You will be able to build better business model. You will attract funding. It's the single most important thing that is in your control. So I find out of the Founders Institute courses, this little session, this talk, is probably going to be the most important in my view. So when you think about team, who builds teams well? Most people turn to the military. The Marines, the Navy SEALs are the most elite warriors. And think about the way they operate. They always say team before mission. Can you imagine if you determine the mission before the team? Because the stronger the team, the bigger the mission. The stronger your team gets, you can go after a bigger mission. So always focus on team before mission, but you have to also move to mission. Now, we have the fortune of actually, it's very humbling to help the military. Tomorrow, in fact, we have 6 of the most senior officers in the Pentagon coming to learn and exchange ideas about leadership, about culture. It's very cool stuff. And so I went last week for 2 days to the Pentagon. And this is a simple formula they shared with me, which I love. Performance equals potential minus impediments. So performance equals potential minus impediments. So what happens? If your team is stronger, whether it's you, a co-founder, whether it's advisors, the strength of your team and advisors will drive your potential up. But then I can't tell you how many times, how many great-looking teams, amazing boards and advisory teams, when you look at performance, I'm not talking about fundraising, but actually making money from your business profit. It doesn't add up. It's terrible. And so the thing most people forget is this other side. What are your impediments? Now, anyone you meet who typically has more experience. Now, age and experience don't necessarily apply. I'm turning 42 this year, but most people believe I have at least experienced 70 years because we do things so fast and making so many mistakes rapidly. Experience, wisdom. The other one thing they say about human beings, we're the only animals that can pass knowledge down. The reason why I mentor entrepreneurs, Founders Institute, everywhere else is because it's actually a privilege we have as human beings. We can make people after us better. People we mentor, we teach. We're the only animals that can do this. So this question of how things fail, how do teams fail, how do businesses fail, when you know how it fails, you can avoid that mindful. You can avoid that trap. They say usually Wall Street is a graveyard of people who are right too soon. So timing matters, but there are many factors. And they say that luck comes to those who are best prepared. It absolutely matters if you build your foundation of the right team. So I'm going to go into 5 of the biggest mistakes and lessons I made in the process of building teams, advisor relationships. So reasons why advisors and mentorship relationships fail, the reason why founder relationships fail, the reason why hiring fails, the reason why firing fails, and then of course one of the toughest things for entrepreneurs. What advice do I take and which one do I not? Because how much conflicting advice there is out there. So I'm going to take you through just these 5 lessons and some tactics within. So quick context. You're considering being a founder, you're going to be CEO. This is what a typical CEO's day looks like. 100 decisions you have to make in a day. Now most people will say, that's not true. When you're CEO, and as you have employees, even a non-response is a decision. You're making so many decisions, even with the slightest, I'm listening to you, or I'm ignoring you, is a decision, and it gets picked up and magnified. And this is what they say. If you want to be an A+ CEO, you have to make 95+ decisions correct every single day. There's not a day that goes by that this standard will change. 95. And they say that if you make 80 or less, you should be fired as CEO. What I learned over the years is that alone you can get 80 correct, fairly consistent. It's like a B. A co-founder, a partner, somebody else, to Kevin's point, who has it's Kevin. Shahab's point, who has the other side of it. If you're aggressive, someone is conservative. It's amazing when you partner together, you magnify and you can become an A+. People say, well, I only helped you get 15 more. No, but B should be fired. You need to be an A+ CEO. So when it comes to mentorships, advisors, nothing more famous than the famous Yoda, Luke Skywalker. But here's the crazy stat that's out there. 96% of mentorship relationships fail. They all end. This is a national stat, global stat. Only 4% will succeed. So how do you become that 4%? Now I know, especially in tech, no matter what stats you put up, all founders think, well, that's me. In this room, I'm that 4%. That's what they call gambling addicts, crazies, casinos. Don't do that. So 5 lessons. Lesson number 1. The reason why mentorship and advisor relationships fail, it's a one-way street. It's never a give and take, even in the long run. And what happens is this. I take from the mentor as much as I can. I will take your time, I will take your money, I'll take your introduction, I'll take your advice. I will suck everything I can get out of you. But what are you going to give? Well, I have nothing to give, is the response. Little me, no knowledge, no money, no introductions. And this is the beginning of how they all fail. They'll never sustain. Because that's a charitable effort. And charitable efforts that provide nothing back ultimately stop at some point. Everyone's got a lot to do. So I'm going to just give you some tactical tips that I found that help solidify mentor relationships. So 3 tips to succeed, but one of the basic first things I say is this. When you get an opportunity, it's a gift usually. It's like a sales opening. You've got a few minutes to try to win them over. I always do this. I send them what I call a 411 beforehand. Let them know about me. Let them know the basics, so I don't have to waste time in that short hour, maybe even half an hour, to go through the basics of what when did I create the company? How many employees? I mean, all these questions, engineering and sales mix, any funds raised to date, and then this question of what keeps you up at night? Like, what do you worry about? Because when they know, and in fact, I would encourage you to do this like in one page, like a resume. Add your picture, make it human. Make sure they feel it. And what that does is it sets up to launch into a productive first conversation. So when you first meet, this is so simple. I cannot tell you how many times I've made this mistake. Start by saying, how much time do you have? And there's a couple important things here. If they say I have 20 minutes and it goes on for 3 hours, I know I'm getting something good out of this. I really want them over. But more importantly, if they say they have 20 minutes and I plan to talk for 45, I might not get to the important stuff. And even though they sometimes book a meeting for an hour, guess what? Things sometimes happen unexpectedly. They have a call at home, an emergency in the office, and they're like, so I have to get cut in 30 minutes. And I can't tell you how many times that messes up a founder. So right at the beginning, very smart, simple thing, how much time do you have? How to build trust. I'm going to take you through how to build trust and how I have found ways over the years and have mentored so many entrepreneurs of how they erode trust. Being vulnerable, humble, grateful, and having follow-through is a great way to build trust. Be thankful for their time, even if the advice was tough. Thank them. Humble is not about being quiet and weak. It's about being open-minded. The thing that you are so convinced of, is it possible that it could be wrong? Is it possible that you have a blind spot that you haven't seen? Vulnerable. Now, vulnerable is something that's very tough, especially for entrepreneurs. It's sharing your pain, talking about the struggles you have without a solution. Being vulnerable doesn't mean like, this is what I struggle with, but I solved that one and solved that one. But you actually are stuck. And this is an opportunity for someone to help. But think of what usually happens in the opposite side. Very guarded, confidential, can't share that, feel uncomfortable to, no, I'm not sure this will continue. There's like an NDA that's written all over you. It's like the most painful thing. And Gabe talks about this in the entry point usually to founders. If you think your idea is so brilliant, right, that I'm going to mortgage my entire life to go pursue that, you're literally crazy. It's not going to happen. Do not worry. Like, pitching your business plan is sharing your idea with as many people as possible. Every question, every non-interest tells you, make it better. So there's no point in being guarded. Arrogant is one of the biggest turnoffs. The bragging. I can't tell you how many people I've mentored over the years. I've seen businesses with over 100 employees go out of business in a year. And they will talk about how great it is. And usually they talk about how much they're spending. I went from 20 employees to 120 in 3 months. I'm thinking, oh God, like, you are in trouble. And they're like, and we're about to hire 100 more. We're doubling every month. I mean, we're buying this and opening. I mean, arrogance, like spewing out with vanity metrics that usually are meaningless. Asking for money or introductions in the beginning is one of the worst things to do. I'm not Jewish, but there's a Jewish saying that I love, that if you ask for money, you're going to get advice. If you ask for advice, you get money. You don't want to ask for money. You don't want to ask for introductions. It's one of the biggest turnoffs because as a mentor, you're telling me, I value your knowledge, your wisdom so little, unless you can write a check or give me an introduction to somebody who can write a check or give me revenue. That's what you're saying without realizing. Don't do that. There's a time for it, not at the beginning. Flakiness is one of the worst. I cannot tell you how my time is valuable. I am going to give a charitable donation of my time to help you. And people cancel a meeting on like same day or 24 hours notice. I mean, I can't tell you how much flakiness shows up. And I was reading this thing this morning, just coming in here today. I was actually awake for a second. Talking about how 99.9% of the time, I do not have time for anybody. For a great mentor, I always have time. That's how valuable they can be. When you do this right, you're going to actually begin the process of having a take. You're taking from the mentor. So now you go to the next stage, which is you have to be able to give. And this is one of the worst ways people do it. Is there some way I can help you? You hear this phrase all the time. And you don't really mean it. But you just feel like, I have to say that. Don't do this. There's a better way to do this. First, do your background. Find out about them. One of the worst things you'll do to a mentor is ask them, hey, so what does your company do? What do you do? Like, it's all up on the website. Bios, backgrounds, where they were, everything. And instead of doing your research, you use the meeting to try to get their 411. Very, very bad. Don't do that. Do your homework. But this is a great question, I found. What are you working on now? The human nature of companies and people is whatever you're working on now are the biggest problems. It's their biggest pain points. If you know what they're working on now, you know this is their challenge, you know if you can even find a remote way to add value to help them fix that, guess what? You will be able to give back to them. So, it's a simple, great question I find to find out what they're working on. Second, if you happen to get to a second meeting, so first, some basics. Timing of the meeting. I found that if you meet quarterly, you become an acquaintance. If you're an acquaintance, you're not going to really be in their thoughts very often. If you meet monthly, it's a little too often. If I meet a mentee and in a month they haven't improved, it's a turnoff. You're moving too slow. So monthly it tends to be too often. Quarterlies and acquaintance, I found 6 to 8 weeks apart. Month to 2 months seems to be the right increment. For you to come in with something improved, new, better. So things to help you secure their second meeting. This is so simple, and one of the most important things I found. The biggest compliment you can give to a mentor who offers good advice is to follow up with him or her to provide results on how that advice helped. How you may have improved it, how you used it. I can't tell you this great mentees, great meeting, profusely thanking you, and then you never hear from them again. And you're like, did it work? Did it help you? And then I'll find out like years later how it was life-changing for them. I was like, if you had just sent me a note, I would have probably given you another meeting. It's so simple, but the mistake always happens. This is so simple. I don't give because I don't know what to do. I don't have any value to give. I really don't know what to do. Just try. I can't tell you as a mentor, the attempt you make, how hard you earnestly try, is very touching. It makes me want to help you more. I'll make a mentor want to help, the harder you try. I'm not talking about being annoying. I'm not talking about showing up my doorstep, sending me 100 emails of idiotic ideas that you think will help me. I'm not talking about that. But make genuine attempts. Make them better and better. And when you do, you have a shot of winning them over. So, number one, lesson number two, the reason why a founder relationship fails. This is what I found the most of over the years. One founder is growing like hell, and the other founder has stagnated in place. It's no different than when they say we grew apart. That's what happens in founder relationships. You grow apart. If you're not mindful of the need to both be growing, one person was great only when you started, and then they're no longer valuable. You have to prevent this. There's a Harvard professor by the name of Bob Keegan. I think he's one of the top-rated professors at Harvard. And he defined burnout in the best way I've ever saw. This is the way he defined burnout. Consider for 1 minute that the research shows the single biggest cause of burnout at work is not work overload. So it's not too many hours, not how much time you spend, but being too long in a work setting without experiencing your own further unfolding. And then imagine working in a setting where you have to hide your weaknesses rather than having a regular opportunity to overcome them. Not growing is why people burn out. When you are not growing, you are dying as a human being. This is why any employee, any person burns out at work. Founders burn out because of this. When they're growing, when they're challenged, and you're growing together, it's like going to the gym and working out together and getting stronger and running faster. It's thrilling. Even in bloody noses and tough situations, it's thrilling. But when it's not, when one's stagnated, when both stagnate, you're going to burn out. And this is a sport that you're going to have to be tough to succeed. Reason why hiring fails. Now, there's a lot of reasons around hiring, so I'll try to cover some of the pieces. But one of the things that we learned the hard way was that you interview for the smartest, most driven person, which is how the Amazons, the Googles, the tech companies typically interview. The smartest, most driven people, right, brilliant people, are the ones you hire. Before you know it, you will have a small army of brilliant jerks. I cannot tell you. If you ever picture going to a rowboat, go to Central Park, and have 4 or even 3 arrogant people sitting in a boat with oars in their hand. Try to move from one side to another side, it's near impossible. Because everyone said, it's my way. This is the way we gotta go. You need to learn to work together. The way also you interview. A lot of companies will believe, well, we have an incredibly robust interview process. Everyone gets interviewed by 11 people. And 11 people have to say yes for them to be hired, except it's the equivalent of having 11 first dates. You see a lot of problems coming. So a couple details in the hiring process. One of the biggest mistakes founders make is this. This is good. Lean equals success, and fat will create failure. And I don't mean physically, but I mean in how bloated you get as a company. Startups with no resources achieve the most amazing things all the time. A 2-person company does something that people with 100 people cannot do. But then you know what happens? They get capital. They inject capital, and they want to do it the right way. We get nice tables, we get nice chairs and everything, and suddenly everything goes to hell. This happens all the time. People I've met in private equity, in venture capital, the partners, you know what they'll say? It's odd when I look back in time, the companies with the most funding all fail. The companies who are constrained succeed. The lack of capital actually drives success because innovation occurs under constraint. And you know what capital does? It scales inefficiency. It doesn't matter if it's a little inefficient, we just pour money and just do more of it. Well, at the beginning it looks like this. It's like 2 boats 1 degree apart. Go 50 million in, 10 million in. It just spreads in such inefficient ways. Most companies scale inefficiencies and eventually catches up when they can't raise the money. Less is more. I'm telling you, I went from 150 employees down to 4. I remember sitting that day in my office, looking up my wall covered in crazy writing everywhere. Scribbles, got to manage everything. I was doing customer service, merchant sales, corporate sales, payroll, everything. I remember sitting there saying, what the hell did the 146 other people do? 4 people. Brought the company back up. Less is more. That's right. Desperation is one of the worst things that you will find yourself in. When you are desperate, you make bad calls. I don't know a human being who makes good judgment calls, especially when the time is tough, when you feel desperate. So you need to find a way to remove desperation. One of the things you'll hear a lot, founders, you have to always be recruiting. For one main purpose, though, just to have options and other choices. When you feel like, oh my God, I'm stuck, if this person doesn't work out, I'm dead, it's over, you will do everything bad and everything wrong to please that individual. The other thing that you get asked a lot about questions, should I hire a senior person or should I groom from within? It's a common question I get all the time, right? Do I hire a recruiter or find a senior person I'm going to bring, head of engineering, head of sales, whatever it may be, or do I train from within? And I always say both at the same time. Because you know how long it takes to recruit and to even onboard and train, and bring in a senior person? It can take 6 months, 9 months, sometimes longer. And you know what they say? 90% of them do not work out. That's a crazy high number. So again, the worst, you never gamble if it's 90% loss. Right? Even the worst is usually 50%. Yeah, we do, as founders. But what happens is this, in the time, I always take someone more junior and say, you're not ready for this role, but I'm going to coach you and train you. And as a founder, you have more skills than you realize. And usually better than whoever you're coaching. Coach them. Give them a chance to be head of marketing, head of sales, head of engineering. Start coaching and training them. And tell them this is temporary because this role is too big for you while I recruit. Well, you know what happens as they get stronger and better? Every day that goes by, you're getting stronger. It's layering bricks. And by the time you're trying to erect a building, you're like, you know what? I think it might be easier going this way. You won't be desperate. Remove desperation, you'll make the right calls. Lateral hiring is like dating. The same person should interview day 1, day 2, day 3, and then you advance only if the date was good. I'll go into more detail on this. And the reason is this. Human beings are the best judge of character, judging another human being. However, if you rush it, we're not so good. So time is what brings out the truth in any human being. Spend enough time. You will see the truth in someone. So this is us. When you look at Next Jump, This is one of the crazy things we learned about hiring is this. The better you get at hiring, we can only attract the top 1% out of MIT, Cornell, Carnegie Mellon, and Georgia Tech. That took 5 years to get that state. But the day we actually got to that state was the day turnover rocketed. You know one of the things we learned? You get poached when you have talent. You don't poach from companies that have no talent. So the higher the density of your talent, the greater poaching that will occur. You're going to be the shortcut for hiring. Our turnover stuck to 40% for 2 full years before going down to virtually nothing. This is something that you'll learn. The better your talent, the more you're likely to get poached. But here's what we found in hiring. You have to hire people. I don't mean students necessarily, but hire people with a student mindset. And the term we use was humility. The opposite would be hiring an expert. An expert, the way they define themselves is, instead of being grateful, they feel entitled. Instead of feeling responsible, ask them about things that went wrong in the past. What went wrong? Whose fault was it? They're victims. It's everybody else's fault. The market was bad. The person I worked for was bad. They played no role in what went wrong. So I always tell them, if I take a time machine and had you go back in time, and you could do that same scenario again, what would you do? And the response is, I'd avoid it. As opposed to, you know what, this is what I could have done differently. What options and choices do you have where you could have done something differently? And that's a person who's taking responsibility, that's reflecting. And no matter how tough the situation, they're figuring out a way to do better. Investment in loss is the same as saying someone who doesn't play it so safe. Most people do this. I play it so safe. I haven't failed. I ask them, when's the last time you've invested in losing? You ever watch Olympic athletes practice? They fall, and they do all this stuff to train for the big match. An investment in loss is playing out of your comfort zone for the sake of improvement. It's a deliberate practice to make it tougher, riskier, scarier. And I asked them this question, and I looked for RFM, recency, frequency, and magnitude. Someone will say, well, the last time I did that was like 5 years ago. They haven't grown in 5 years. How often? Are we talking about at least once a month, once a week? Or is it like every year there's one instance where I try to grow? The magnitude. Tiny little things matter, but big things matter too. You want to see someone taking a shot at playing it not so safe, but trying to grow. Doing something that's difficult. Challenging beyond their needs. This is something we found very important when you hire. This is the classic mistake. The most rigorous hiring that's done by companies will say we have 11 people interviewing the same person, and so it would be like 11 people here all interviewing me. And you do a thumbs up or thumbs down. They say no maybes in hiring. It's a visceral thumbs up, and everything else is thumbs down. And this is the process Google used that we adopted first. And it's kind of crazy because on one hand it worked. We screened for 11 people interviewing one candidate. Now this is a very costly process. And we said only when you get unanimous 11 thumbs up will we hire. So this is how we started the process of recruiting engineers. And on one hand it was good. On the other hand we found mistakes. We found a far more effective process because most of you will do lateral recruiting, which is not recruiting straight out of college, but recruiting someone who's somewhere else. Think of the first date, it's just the vitals, get to know each other. What do you do, what do you like? I mean, all the basics that we're talking about. But the second date is where, if you advance, right, the tough questions. What happens if it doesn't work out? What are some of the reasons why it might not work out? Have your divorce fights. Understand how it could occur. Because if you feel good even after that, you might get to the third date. Now this is a question we added in much later in our years. We found so important. We call it the take interview. Meaning, we know when you come to work with us, you will give us your skills, your knowledge, your time. What do you need to take from us? You know the response, usually it's not very good. It's really saying, why us? Why do you want to work with me? Why us? I've heard a lot of times, I want to work in an entrepreneurial place with very smart people. There are thousands of companies in New York City. You just described everybody. Why us? It'll be like me saying, I'd like to marry you. And you're like, me? Why me? You're pretty, you seem nice, and you're a girl. Let's get married. There's no way. You'd be like, I'm probably not right for you. You're probably not right for me. That's what you should say. And the number one thing is that today, in the tech world, with all the technology, you can interview for 100 jobs with the click of a mouse. nobody commits to doing any research. There's so much knowledge out there, so much research. Go deep and commit. I want someone who wants to work with me and can describe and define why. And I don't mean like Simon Sinek's why, I mean do the research. Go look at videos, go look at blog posts. Tell me something that's so important that it's like the whole, like, you complete, like, you need to find that, because otherwise, they're going to find somebody else who's a pretty looking girl who's nice. A company that has smart people that's entrepreneurial. And there's thousands, tens of thousands of them cropping up every time. Firing. Biggest lesson in firing, and these are some of the most scathing comments on NextJump on Glassdoor. So I'm telling you the lessons I've learned in firing, and the only thing I mean, this is like worst place to work should be called next slide. Save yourself to not be the next to jump. Toxic. I fire the wrong way. And the only thing I've asked former employees is please forgive a stupid young CEO. I didn't know what I was doing. And you know the number one thing I learned? You fire people without dignity, without letting them take their dignity, it's going to haunt you for years. 7 years later, we still have engineers showing up at campus events telling people, do not apply to this company. I fire the worst ways possible. So things I learned in firing. Your ex-employee is your number one walking viral advertisement. An employee who has never worked in your company doesn't know, just simply doesn't know. An employee who's working in the company is biased. The person who left is your number one walking ad. I tell people when you leave with them, just remember you will have Thanksgiving with them every year for the rest of your life. Now go break up. Fire them the right way. Timing too. When things do not work out, this is very hard to do. Timing matters. If you get rid of someone in less than 6 months, you're usually going to be okay. But when they go beyond 6 months, all the pain will come. Most people, especially when senior, within the first 3 months, best behavior. Months 3 to 6 is when all the pain comes out. They're trying now to apply themselves. And in that window, you're going to feel these things like, that's not right, and you're going to keep them and keep them. And if they leave after 6 months, there's always collateral damage. It's always lingering damage. If you divorce in the first 3 months, you won't even feel it. No one even remember their name or where they're from. It makes a vast difference. Last lesson, what advice do you take? Now there was a blog post that had this, I love this. Mentorship advice usually looks like this. It's A or B. Too specific. Why does this happen when I push this button? It's way too specific. Or it's too high level. You need to focus on growth. You need to focus on profitability, on market share. You're like, what do I do with that? Like, you need to be a good person. Yeah, thank you for that great advice. It's not very good. 3 things I found to help. I want to know the origin of advice. Where did that advice come from? Because there's a difference between people who read it, heard it somewhere, or saw a video, read a book, versus people who learned in the trenches. What I call knowing it in your bones. They know the nuanced details of why it works and doesn't work. That's advice that really is the best advice you get. The origins of where they come from. The other question I look at is, are they growing? I have a 3-meeting rule. When I meet with them first time, usually a great mentor, it's all the value you will get right there. It's the second meeting which eerily sounds exactly like the first meeting. And by the 3rd meeting, I'm like, oh my God, it's like the exact same thing. They're not growing. When people are growing, when I meet my mentees, I'll tell them, hey, you know what I told you last time? I learned something so much better, throw that all out. You want people who are growing. People who are growing are great advisors, great mentors. If not, it's like someone living on stored fat. It's the same advice over and over again. And it doesn't matter if it's you or somebody else. This is one thing you'll find over time. I call it the 51% rule. I want someone who is right 51% of the time, the majority of the time. And you know, all advice plays out over time. So you look back and I'm like, this person was right most of the time. That's a person that I will always have time for. I will always look to give. But when you find a lot of mentors, and this is very dangerous, they're right 1 out of 10 times, 2 out of 10 times. They will kill you with their other 80 to 90% bad advice. And they will keep reminding you of the one advice they gave you that was good. I stay away from those people as much as possible. Because in my weakest of moments when I feel desperate, I listen to them by accident. Because they remind me how they were right one time. If you get all this right, what I've seen over time is this. Employees will first talk about how you care about them as a company. And eventually you'll get to this better place. They're proud to be, and so in our company we call them next jumpers. They're proud to be a next jumper. And that's what I find success to be. So, thank you.
Thank you.